Good evening, everyone. I am your host and instructor, Laney Shaughnessy, and welcome to Spindle TV, your best source for CNC CAD/CAM training videos. Spindle TV is brought to you by Digital Woodcarver, inspiring your creativity and providing you with the tools to create your own unique masterpieces. Welcome, welcome. Let me turn some light on the subject here. Don't know why I didn't have the lights on, but hello everyone. Welcome from Ocala, Florida. I'm back at the casa here. My messy background and backdrop. Familiar faces and all. Oh my. How's everybody doing? Hey, welcome Peter. Thanks for joining us tonight. All the way from New Zealand. Tippy, Ronnie, William. Hey everybody. How are y'all doing? Welcome Wayne. Wow, we're just getting everybody from all over. From New Zealand to Canada to Ohio, Indiana. Welcome Jeff. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Tonight we're going to talk about molding and textures, and we're going to talk about the molding toolpath. We're going to talk about the texturing toolpath, but we're also going to talk about the texturing tool. And then for those of you that have Aspire and everything, we're going to talk about creating textured backgrounds and stuff as well. So we're going to kind of cover a couple areas in the texture world and stuff and all. So we'll get started there. Well, I've been on the road for a couple of weeks. I was away last week and everything, so I'm back, and I just arrived back in Ocala, Florida. We were at the St. Louis show this past weekend. I just arrived back in Florida just a couple of hours ago, and next week the Detroit show. I'm not going to be at the Detroit show, but Burl will be there. So if you happen to be near the Detroit area and you're planning on going to the woodworking shows, definitely stop by the Digital Woodcarver booth. I believe we're going to have our big 4x8 machine, our 5100 set up and running. Definitely go by and say hi to Burl and everything. Now I will be broadcasting live to that show if everything works out. We're going to do some audio and visual tests and everything tomorrow, but I may be still teaching the classes remotely for that show. We'll see how well that works out. All right, let's go ahead and welcome Steve and Mary Quirin, new customers. Got their machine last night. Welcome, guys and girls. All right, so let's go ahead and hey Dennis, hey James, let's jump over in Mr. Coates. How you doing, sir? Let's go ahead and jump over into our Vectric software, and let's get this party started. Let's see here. We're gonna start off in Vectric VCarve Pro, and everything that I'm going to be doing here can be done in Vectric VCarve Pro, Vectric VCarve Desktop, Vectric Aspire. When we come to the part about creating textured backgrounds and everything, when it comes to creating component backgrounds, style backgrounds and things from images or what have you, that will be an Aspire function. When we jump into Aspire, we'll see that. And our textured background tool from Aspire. You'll see that later in the class as well. But right now, everything that I'm going to be doing can be done in all three programs and stuff. So let's go ahead and enough of me. Let's jump in. Feet first. All right, so in our Vectric software, let's go ahead and set up a project. Now, for this project, let's start out with just a very simple sign type design. Let's add some texture to it, and let's talk about our different texturing tools. Our vector texture tools as well as our texturing toolpath. So for this sign, I'll go ahead and make a single-sided job, and let's give this some width. Let's go 21 inches in length, and let's go I'm going to go wide on this one. Let's go 11 1/4, a 1 by 12. If I went to Lowe's or Home Depot and bought a 1 by 12, it'd be 11 1/4. And then let's go 3/4 of an inch thick. Now, for all you new folks that are joining us, the width of your computer screen from left to right represents the x-axis of your CNC. That's why you see the word width X here. And the height of your computer screen, up and down, represents the y-axis of your CNC. That's why you see the word width with the letter X and the height with the letter Y. The width of your screen is your x-axis, the height is the Y. So however you're going to clamp your board on your table, that's how you'd orientate it. Now for this project, you know, I've always work off of my spoil board and everything, and I always work off the bottom of the material, which is the top of my spoil board. So that's how I got my Z set up. We're not doing any cutting out or cutting through of parts at all, so we can also work off the material surface. You don't always have to work on the bottom. I generally will jump back and forth between the two, and I will a lot of times touch off on the material surface. Got a nice flat board, and I'm not cutting through, I'm just carving and everything. But if I am doing a cutout of a piece and everything, then I always reference off of my spoil board, which would be considered the machine bed in the Z0 position. The XY datum position, our start position, we can start from any of the four corners of the board, but we're going to start from the center for this. I like to have these quadrants split up here just to show you. Now my jig, I probably work off the center for right now for the design, but when I actually go to create this toolpath and stuff, I'll be setting it up to work off the bottom left corner, because I'll be using my digital wood carver quick set tool and my jig that references off the bottom left corner. So I'll be using those two to set up my job, but for this demonstration I'd like to work off the center for a little bit to so we can reference off that some. Now this brings up a good point. If ever I provide class files or anything for a project or for a class, be sure when you open those files up in your Vectric software that you go through and look at the job setup as well as the toolpaths and the toolpath setups and the tools, and be sure to always recalculate those toolpaths to fit your needs, your machine, and your tools. Okay, don't ever take a project for granted when you download or open a project up from someone else. Check your job setup. Also check your toolpaths and your tools. Make sure your speeds and feeds and everything are set correctly for your machine. Alright, let's go ahead and click OK on this job setup. Now for this, let's talk about oh, you hear what? Is there an echo, guys? Do you guys hear an echo? Does everybody hear an echo or just Jeff? Let me know. Give me a shout out if you hear an echo in anything that I'm saying. If you hear an echo, I'll check my audio settings. Alright, for this I'd like to have a bit of a boundary or border for these vectors and things. So I'm just going to take my rectangle tool, third icon under the Create Vectors menu, first row. I'm going to go ahead and open that up, and I'm going to use my smart snapping. I have 9.5, 9.5, and I'm going to snap to one of my snapping points on my board. In this case, I'm going to snap to the corner, hold down my left mouse button and drag to the opposite corner. Snap to that to create that rectangle around the perimeter of my board. Now I'm going to go ahead and take that perimeter, that rectangle I just drew, and I'm going to offset it. I'd like this offset to be in, 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch. I like going about 1 inch. It depends on really how wide I want my frame to be and stuff like that. And also it's either going to be 1, maybe 1 1/4. And also let's do a 1 inch distance here on that offset, and I'm going to offset inward. I'm going to create sharp corners, so I will check that off, and I do not need this original rectangle that I drew, so I will check off to delete the original and select the new, and we'll click offset and we'll get that created. Now usually when I'm doing textures and things, I'll usually take my rectangle and I will put in, a nice little radius of some sort, on those four corners. But I'm going to stick with a square border for now, because this is going to lead into what I'm talking about, the molding toolpath. So I'm going to stick with this for a bit through this class, and also we have that, we can just kind of transition from one to the other. All right. Jeff, I'm not sure, buddy. You'll have to check, make sure you don't have two sets of speakers on or something. All right, so with this now, in your drawing tools, we do have the texturing toolpath, or the texturing tools, sorry, under the Create Vectors menu. And this is our vector textures that we can use. Now, we can use this vector textures tool in conjunction with our texturing toolpath to get some randomization in it. Randomization, is that a word? To get some randomizing of that pattern that we create with the texturing toolpath. Or we can actually just use the texturing toolpath and let the software generate its own pattern and things. Generally, when I am working with the texturing tool, I am trying to simulate some form of wood grain pattern, just to, some kind of line groove, because we are going to be creating lines. What angle those lines are, what angle they run, and their spacing, and how high the wave of that angle or that line is, how high and low, how smooth it is or how noisy it is, all that we're working with lines in here with the texturing tool. But when we're working with the texturing tool path alone, then it's going to randomize based on the perimeters that we may set within that tool path and everything. It's not going to follow the patterns, which we have the option to, of the texture tool. So let's go over and let's do both. We'll do one with and one without. So for this, I'd like to go with kind of a wood grain simulation. So I'm going to go with 0 degrees, meaning that I want these lines to run right straight across the board here. And I want the spacing to not be too far apart. I want to, if I'm going to simulate wood grain and everything. So let's go with about a 30 seconds. 0, 3, 1, 2, 5. And for you boys and girls over there using metric, I don't know what that, I work in inches and everything, so sorry, Peter. All right, so we're going to go with a 30-second line spacing. We'll see what that does for us and everything. Now our wave amplitude, these wave lines, these wavelength lines that we're going to be creating, that amplitude, how high and low we want those waves to be. Well, I want this to be a relatively low wave pattern. I don't want it to be too big. So I'm going to start off with about a 1/16 of an inch height between the highest peak and the lowest peak. Now, as far as the wavelength, how that wavelength that's being created, let's take and we'll keep these parameters here, but I'm going to hit cancel just for 1 second. I'm going to look at my job size or my border size here, and it's 19 inches wide. So I opened up the size tool so I could see my rectangle here and what size it was, and it's 19 inches wide, and I would like to run from 1 inch or one end to the other on this. And so we'll go back into that textures tool, and I would like to have that wavelength to run the full length, 19 inches. Now I'm not going to have any noise right here, and I've noticed I don't have any design on here right now for the texture to go around. Right now, if I were to create these, this texture is going to go all the way across my board and stuff. And I want to do that just to show, for right now, I want to do that to show the different pattern that's going to come about from how we change our parameters. And then we're going to come in and actually create a design for that texture to go around. We'll come in and recreate this pattern. So I'm going to have these vectors placed on their own layer, and I'm just going to texture tool lines is a fine name for me as a default. So let's go ahead and click on preview, and you'll see that we have just a very simple line pattern, right? There's let's see if we can zoom out. It's almost like it's a solid fill there. There's no variation. These lines are kind of just got a small 1/16 of an inch running straight across. There's no pattern at all. So let's kind of increase our spacing a bit. Let's come in here, and I haven't clicked OK yet, so I can make changes in this. Let's change our spacing. Let's go 1/8 of an inch apart, right? We were at a 32nd. Let's go 1/8 of an inch apart, and let's preview that. All right, we're getting some separation now, right? Now it's a little bit too smooth. It's not really a kind of a wood grain pattern, so let's add a little bit of noise in here. So I'm going to slide this slide bar up a bit. Let's click preview again. Okay, now we're starting to get some, little pattern going on here and stuff. So I think let's look at my amplitude here. There's not a whole lot of variation, right, in that noise, about a 1/16 of an inch. Let's go ahead and let's bump that up to about 1/4 of an inch and click preview. Okay, so now we're getting kind of a little bit more of a raise and a low here over that 19 inches. That 1/4 of an inch is kind of going over the full 19 inches. Let's add a little bit of noise, a little bit more noise in there. And I'm just hitting preview till I come up with kind of a pattern or a look that I like. All right, so that's going to do it for me right there. I'm going to stick with these parameters. Okay, so now, this is what I would create my toolpath on. But this is, if I was doing this, I'm just actually texturing a board, right? I have absolute no design going on here. So let's actually get some design going in here, and then let's texture. But these are I want this texture to kind of form around my design. So let's start off by, let's grab an image, and I'm going to open up my random images here, and let's look at my downloads. And let's see if I got anything. If not, then I will go online and I will grab it's supposed to say fish, not F-I-A-G, F-I-S-H. Okay, I don't have any fish in downloads. Talk about being unprepared. All right, I'm going to open up Google Chrome. I thought I had a photo in here, so let's go in, and I'm going to type in my search here. I'm going to go, let's see here, bass vector. Going to look for some bass fish. So let's go to images. And notice bass and bass are spelt about the same. We're going to get pictures of fish and guitars. That's the English language for you, bass and bass. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look and see what we've got going on here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and save this image. It's going to go into my folder for this job, texture and molding. All right, with that, let's go into our desktop. Let's go into our texture and molding toolpath, and let's click and open that up. Now, I'm going to zoom into that image, and I'm going to open up the tracing tool that's under the Create Vectors menu, the Trace Bitmap tool. Whenever we're tracing a JPEG, PNG, bitmap, GIF, or TIFF, that is a pixeled image. Those are image files that we can bring in to the software, but it has to be traced. We can't create a toolpath on an image until it's vectorized, until it's converted to a vector. So we're going to use the Trace Bitmap tool to do that. And whenever we open the tool, the first thing it's going to want to do is fade that image. So let's turn that bitmap fading off. Let's slide that to none. We want to see its full glory. Two ways to trace an image, ladies and gentlemen: color and black and white. Color simply means this: if I choose the color option, it's going to look at all the shades of colors, and it's going to lay out 16 of those main shades. And I'm going to have a trace color, whatever I choose. Generally, I work with red. But as I trace off the colors that I want to trace, it's going to fill those areas with that red. My goal is to get a nice fill of trace color. And if I zoom in real tight, you can see that there's still shades of colors that I could check off and continue on and to fill in more and more images and stuff. Or if I just want to simplify things, I could take my threshold here and I could bring that down a bit, you know. I could bring that down some, and you know, I don't need all 16 showing. And what I'm looking for is a nice, good, solid representation of my bass filled with my trace color, because that's what the lines are going to be drawn on. For this, I do not want to be too tight on the corner fit. Right now I'm at 100%. It's going to be rigid lines. I want a nice contour, so I'm going to use the default corner fit, which is 82%. I am, even though this is a high quality picture, there's not a lot of variation. You'll see that when we talk about the black and white option. I am going to turn up that noise filter some, probably about 8. And then when I click preview, you know, it'll trace the image. So now if I turn that fading on just to hide the image, you can see my tracing here. Okay. Now, if I didn't want to use the color option, I just wanted to convert that image to a true black and white. Click on black and white. I don't have any colors to check off here. All I have is a sliding bar that I'm going to slide in one direction or another. But I got to zoom in real tight to see the variance in this, you know, when I'm going from one direction to another. There's not a whole lot of variation in this design. So I'd probably be about 75 there. And all I'm looking for is a nice black and white representation of the image that I want to trace. And then with my same parameters here, I'll click preview and I'll trace that image. If I slide that fading over to full to hide that image or fade that image, you'll see that I basically got the same result. Okay, so either option you can use, just whichever one fits the application better for you. Okay. All right, so after clicking preview, it will trace the image. Now we need to click apply to lock it in and then close that tool. All right, so let's go ahead. When we have an image trace, we no longer need that image, okay, the actual pixeled image. So let's go up to our layers bar here at the top of the screen, and the software created a bitmap layer for us. Let's turn that layers visibility off, this light bulb here, and we'll go ahead and hide that layer, or turn it off. We don't need it visible and everything. Okay. All right. Now, notice that I was in my texture tool lines here when I traced this image. Notice how it was bold here. That means that bass tracing, that vector tracing that just occurred, what you see on the screen here now, is now inside of this layer. Well, I want my texture tool lines to go in this layer, not my bass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my bass here, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to move it to layer 1. Okay, I don't want anything on that texture tool lines until I recreate that new texture and stuff here in a moment. Now the reason why it put that bass on that texture is because I had that layer active when I was drawing. We need to make sure that if we are working with multiple layers, and layers are just translucent pieces of film, think about, and we're separating parts of our design on these, and we can turn on and off their visibility. We can associate toolpaths with them. We can lock a layer so we can't change it. There's all kinds of things that we can do with our layers. But I want this to be on layer 1. And I want to be able to read layer 1 up here in this box. All right, so with that bass there, I've been doing enough talking here. Let's go ahead and size this up. Now, double clicking on an object puts it in transform mode. When you are transforming an object, that means you're moving, sizing, rotating mirror or copying, distorting, or aligning it to your material or another object. In this case, when I double click on an object, it puts it in transform mode, meaning that I don't necessarily have to open up my tools to do any of those things. So I'm going to size this by grabbing one of these white boxes here, and I want to keep the aspect ratio, so I'm going to grab a corner white box. And if I hold my shift key down, it will size it, keeping that object centered of itself. So I'm just going to size this up, and very simply I can either use my mouse to drag from one side to another or wherever I want to place this, or I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to place it where I want to. Now with this bass here, we're going to make sure he's centered within my perimeter here, my border. So I'm going to, since my border is centered as well on my board, I can just use the alignment tool, align to material up and down, not centered. We don't want to do that. I want it to stay in its current position, but make sure it's centered up and down. And we got that small little shift there. We're good to go. Now I could have also selected that rectangle last, and whenever you select an object last, it becomes the selection, and I could actually align that bass tracing vector to that rectangle itself. I could be on the inside edge, I could be on the top outside edge, I could be in the center of it, you know, all of those things with that particular selection. In this case, I want to be centered where I'm at, but I do want to be over here to the right. So I'll just use my arrow keys and bump him over. Now, for this, let's go ahead and create some text. Let's add some text in here. I'm going to make a sign for old Bob's Bait and Tackle Shop, and let's see what we can do here. Let's go with I'm actually going to go with a nice monotype type cursiva for this font, and I want it to be bold, but though, and I want the height of that font, I want the text height of it to be about 1 inch, actually a little bit more than that. Let's go 1.5. Okay, I may change the font up. I might not do the monotype cursiva for this, but let's see here. Bob's Bait and Tackle. Let's move this over a little bit. Yeah, let's change up the font. So I'm going to select on that font or that text that I've just created, and I'm going to open up my Draw Text tool once again because I'm editing that particular text. Let's go ahead and let's go in here and let's go with a very simplified saddlebag. No, let's not do that. Now, I'm having a dilemma, right? I'm like trying to choose a font, and I got all I have in my drop-down menu is this ABC, ABCDE, you know, type of options here. I really can't get a good looking kind of view of what font I have because I have thousands of fonts to choose from. So let's go ahead and use our wordmark.it site. Let's go and open up a web page here, and we're a browser, and Word mark.it. It's a site that helps you choose fonts. So let's go in here, and I'm just going to type in a phrase or sentence, and I'll just type in old Bob's Bait and Tackle. Let me know if I'm misspelling tackle. Now, this will show me all the fonts that are installed on my computer, but I need to install my Adobe Flash because I want it to show all of my fonts, all of my true type fonts and open type fonts, every font that's on my computer. And once again, let's go ahead and do that again. Bob's Bait and Tackle. All right, so now I can choose my fonts. These is showing me this phrase with all of my fonts here. And of course, you know, from here, let's say I wanted to download another font, DaFont. I'm going to recommend a website, DaFont, DAFONT.com. All right, DAFONT.com. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it again. DaFont.com is one of my favorite sites for getting fonts. And there is a new font that I've installed on my laptop when I travel around that I really like, that I would also like to grab here as well. And that font I'm going to recommend to you guys and girls. It's called the Cast Iron font. So Cast Iron, I'm going to type in here, and I'm going to click search, and there it is. This font looks sexy, ladies and gentlemen, when it's carved. It's really a nice font. So I'm actually going to download that, okay? So I've got this font here, and I'm going to download that font to my computer. And when it's finished downloading, I'm going to open it up. Okay? So now I'm in, and I want everyone to kind of see this procedure. Now I'm in my File Explorer window. Now when it downloads, this is a zip file. It's zipped. It's compressed. So we need to extract. We have some compression tools within our File Explorer window. This is important because a lot of people still, don't know how to unzip a file. So bear with me as we go through this. We're going to click Extract to show the compression folder tools, which is the Extract All tool. And I'm going to click on Extract All, and it's going to open up my wizard. So I can extract, I can extract that compressed zip file. And now you're going to choose a folder where you want it to go. Well, for me, I'm just going to do it in my Downloads folder. So I'm going to go ahead and click Extract. I'm just going to let it fall where it lays. And when it's finished, it will open up a new File Explorer window with the unzipped file. All I have to do now is simply right-click and choose, right-click on the font and choose Install. Left-click on Install. And that's it. It'll go through the installation process, and we're done. Okay? So now we can come in, and if I wanted to, I have my text box open, so I simply have to close the text box. We don't have to restart the program or anything like that. I can simply reopen that text box, and if I decided I wanted to go to the C's and find that cast iron font, it will be in there. Okay? That's how easy it is to add a font to the Vectric software or to your computer. So let's go back to WordMarket, and the cast iron font might have a role in one of these designs tonight because I really like that font, but we got to see if it's fit. It's got to be appropriate, but I will show you what it looks like being carved and stuff. For Bob's Bait and Tackle, I want kind of a basic font, nothing too fancy because I want my texture to kind of stand out and stuff. So I think I'm just going to go with my Kokomo title font. I think, yeah, I can either use the paint, Kokomo title paint, or the Comica. I keep saying Kokomo. I'm not a beach boy down in Kokomo. Comica. I'll usually use the title or the paint. I'm going to use the paint option. It'll give me kind of a bold letter there. So Comica, title, paint. That's what I'm going to use. Let's go back to Vectric. Let's drop this down. Let's go to that K, and let's come on down to Comica. The Comica font, again, is also from dafont.com. It comes with a lot of options and stuff, and I want the paint option. There we go. That'll kind of give me kind of a bubbly, bold font and stuff. All right, now notice how I could get this to fit into size and everything. I could size my text down and move it over and stuff, but I'd like to kind of keep it a certain height. So what I want to do is I want to kind of break the text up a bit. I want to right-click on the selected text, the text block. Let's proper terms here. The text block that I created. I want to right-click and I want to break that text block into individual text lines. And because I'd like to be able to work now with these lines of text individually, because I want Bob's. Bob's the name of the business, of the sign and everything. So I want Bob's to kind of stand out. So let's get Bob's up there kind of big. Let's bring it down a bit. And let's give old Bob's a nice little slant here, a little bit of an angle, kind of run up. And then on the bait and tackle, that's going to be kind of, what type of company it is, bait and tackle. There we go. All right. And now let's go ahead and add in some more text. I'm just going to click on my screen where I'd like it to fall. And let's go ahead and go right about there. I'll move it around, you know, but you know, I can, you know, drop it here anywhere. And let's go let's see here. What do I want to say under Bob's Bait and Tackle? Let's see here. Let's put in a town. Let's go ahead and let's say old Bob's Bait and Tackle is in Ocala, Florida. I'll be doggone, it's in my hometown. How do you like that? I'm going to use just a very simple regular title font for this. Make it a little bit smaller, a little bit thinner. There we go. And I'm going to bring that size down to about 3/4. Text height, let's go about 3/4. And let's drop that down here, kind of somewhere right there. And let's take old Bob's Bait and Tackle, instead of it being up so high, let's bring that down to right about here, because it's really not about the design, right? I'm just trying to fill up the page because we're talking about textures and stuff tonight. But I think this is what we're going to go with. Right here is going to be, let's see here. What if I stretch that out a bit? I'm stretching, I'm double clicking. When I'm double clicking on these objects, I'm putting them in transform mode. Remember? Transform mode. I can size, rotate, scale, I can mirror. Scale is another name for size. I don't know why I said it twice, but I can move, size, rotate, mirror, copy. I can align and things by moving it around when I'm in transform mode. So when you see me double click and you see these boxes put up, I'm in transform mode, and I'm just grabbing one of this and I'm stretching it out a bit. Okay, and for those of you with any form of OCD, let's try to get this somewhat straight in this, between this space and this space. Let's get it somewhat centered up there. It's not going to be quite centered, but just somewhat. All right. OCD is a serious thing. I got a very bad case of everything's got to look good. I don't make everything perfect all the time, but man, it just when things catch your eye, it throws the whole sign off. All right, so now I've got some fill area there, right? I've got some content on my sign. Let's go back to our texturing tool. This is what the subject is all about tonight. Let's go ahead and go back in there. Now notice that it kind of saved my parameters. This software is very intuitive. You know, the last time I had the texture tool open, I plugged in some parameters. The next time I open it up, it's saying, hey, this is what you did last time. Do you want to do it again? And I do. This is the parameters I want to use because it's actually relative to my sign. But now I need to select my text and things. And the one thing about the textures, using the texture lines and everything about the vectors and all, if I create these lines right now, they're coming right up to my border. Let me select my border in here. They're coming right up to my border. They're coming right up to my text. They're coming up everything. And I do not believe, because in the texturing toolpath, and I want you to understand there's two separate tools we're kind of referring to here, our texturing toolpath and our vector texture tool, okay, when we're drawing. Two separate things, but I can use my vector texture tool to create a pattern, and then I can use that texturing toolpath to follow that pattern, or I can just use that texturing toolpath and let it create its own pattern. And one of the things is when I'm creating a texture toolpath, I can tell it to stay away from my boundaries, my bass, my text, and my border by a certain distance. I can tell it to offset. But if I use the selected vectors as a pattern, you notice what happens here. You see how I grayed that out? The only thing that I can randomize or use when I'm using the pattern that I'm about to create as the you know, the texture, is the maximum cut depth and the minimum cut depth. It's going to vary in the depth between those, you know, those two cut sizes that I put in here. In this case, 1/8 of an inch and a 1/16. It's going to randomize that cut, but I can't tell it to stay away from my boundary. And in the actual tool itself over here, I don't have an offset option, how far to stay away from my design. So if I'm going to use the texturing tool, then I have to create those kind of offset boundaries. Otherwise, my texture is going to cut right on into my letters and things. You know, we don't want that. Because right now, if I click OK, or preview, not OK, if I click preview and everything, you can see that texture goes right up to those lines. And that means my bit, when it's cutting out, it's going to be cutting into this, because understand, I'm going to be doing a V bit, a V carving. And I'm going to have these, because I'm doing a texture and everything, all these letters in this bass and everything are going to be raised up. We'll also notice how the textures inside my bass. We'll work around that. We don't want that to happen. So I'll show you how to fix that. But I definitely don't want this texture coming up to my design. So let's go ahead and kind of hit cancel here on this. And let's create some offsets, because, you know, we got to. Well, we don't have to, but it'll look much cleaner if we do. So let's go ahead and first of all, my bass is grouped together as one object. Let's go ahead and ungroup him. Okay. And because I only want to select the outside border of the bass, not all of the stuff. I don't want that texture going into his gills and things like that. So I just want the outside border. So ungroup is this tool here. So in our edit objects, we have group and ungroup, but you also have keyboard shortcuts. And guys, some of you are just now joining me for the first time. Some of you have been with me for a while. But I'm going to try to teach you, you know, keyboard shortcuts and things like that to help you improve. But you don't have to know them. You can just use your tools. I'll always point those out to you, group and ungroup. And also, if you want to learn more about keyboard shortcuts, under the help menu, keyboard shortcuts, okay? Yeah, and it'll show you some of the most common ones. But let's go ahead and select this, and let's select Bob's and Bait and Tackle in Ocala, Florida here. And let's offset this with our offset tool. First icon, last row, under the offset and layout tools. And I'm going to offset this outward. I'm going outward, not inward in this case. I'm going outward, and it's a small amount, right? So I got to think about how tall my text is going to be, and then how far my offset needs to be. And let me illustrate this with a drawing. If I'm using a 60-degree V-bit, let's go with a 60-degree V-bit here. Okay, space bar to finish. And let's say that let's take a line here, and let's draw a line right at the tip of my bit. Now, use your imagination with me and everything. Let's zoom in tight so this is all you see here. Imagine my V-bit sitting on the top of my board. Okay? If I simulate a cut, so let's say I want my text to be 1/8 of an inch deep. So I'm going to move this line up 1/8 of an inch. So let's move this up relative to its position. Y is up and down. Remember the height of your computer screen. So I'm going to move it up 0.125 and click apply. So now this is a simulation of my bit cutting down 1/8 of an inch into my wood, right? So this distance from the tip of my bit to my offset, because right here is where my vectors are going to fall. If I had letters or something, they're going to fall here. Okay, so they're going to fall. Let's try that again. The edge of those letters and everything are going to fall right here. So I've got this offset. That means I'm going to have this nice angle to the bottom of my 1/8 inch cut. I'm going to have this nice angle, this nice offset. And I really like to know how far that is, so I can set my offset, and that will keep my vector lines away. So let's get rid of these two little lines that I made, because I don't want to confuse it. And let's use our dimension tool, add dimension to a drawing. And I'm going to do a horizontal measurement, and I'm going to measure, and let's make this text height a little bit smaller, so because we're kind of zoomed in here. Let's go with a 1/16 of an inch is actually fine. I'm going to click here at the tip of my bit, and I'm going to click here at this intersection. Okay, and that distance, that offset distance, is 0.0722. Okay, so I need to at least, at the very least, be that far away with my offset that I'm going to create, so my bit won't hit the bottom of my letters, right? That little nice little angled wall that gets created during that cut. So at a minimum, I'm going to be a little over 1/16 of an inch. Well, I don't like cutting it too close, and I like to be, a little bit further away. So I'll probably go like a 0.1 or a 0.125, and kind of 1/8 of an inch is kind of my go-to number for a lot of these times when I'm doing my offset for textures and stuff. So let's go ahead and hopefully you kind of understand that. From the tip of the bit to where that letter is going to be cut on the edge of my letter, that offset distance is 0.0722. So let's go ahead and go back to our design. Let's select old Bob's Bait and Tackle here and hold down the shift key, and I'm going to select the mouse. Now notice, for you guys and girls, you're going to hear me that have been with me for a while, you know how to do this, but for the ones that are new and kind of watching and everything, I am selecting this. I can click on an object. I can hold down the shift key and select more than one object at a time, and you always hold your shift when you're selecting more than one vector. I can draw a box around an object. I don't care that I'm going over my bass here when I'm drawing this box. As long as that object is not 100% in that box, when I'm drawing from left to right, it will not select it. It will only select what's 100% in that box, and holding down my left mouse button and selecting. But if I drug that mouse from right to left, then it's going to select everything that it touches. Okay, everything that box touches. So in this case, what you saw me do a moment ago is I selected my Bob's Bait and Tackle, I held down my shift key, and I clicked on the outside line of that bass. Okay. All right, so let's go back into our offset tool, and I know I need to be at 0.0722, right? That's kind of a minimum. I'm going to go 0.1. Why not go a whole 1/8 of an inch if you're going to go ahead and go 0.1? What is 20 thousandths amongst friends? Let's go ahead and go that 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so 0.125, I'll go there. Now I'm not going to delete the original, and I definitely don't want sharp corners. Okay, let's turn that off. But I'm not going to delete the original like we did when we were offsetting our rectangle before. I'm just going to click on Select New, and I'm going to click Offset, okay? And what this is going to do now, it's going to create a protective boundary. It's going to take a protective boundary around my design, okay? And my texture is going to carve within that boundary. Well, right here, if I'm using a V-bit to carve my texture, I might get a couple little lines in there, but sometimes it's not going to really carve in certain areas and stuff. So I may just not texture them at all. So what I'm going to do is, the reason why I chose Select New is because every new vector that it just drew is selected pink. And now all I have to do is unselect what I want to keep. Okay, unselect what I want to keep. I just want all the outside perimeters. Holding down my shift key when I'm clicking and unselecting, and everything else that's remaining, I'm just going to simply right click and delete, or hit the delete key on my keyboard. I don't need that stuff. I just want those boundaries. Alright, with that being said, let's select our boundaries now. We don't even need our text selected anymore. Let's select our boundaries around our bass. And now, wait a minute. Laney, you offset the text and all, but you didn't offset your border. Let's do that. Let's offset inward. Now, the same thing applies. This angle cut, the V-bit that's cutting that perimeter, it's going to be 0.0722. So maybe I want to stay 1/8 of an inch away from that as well. Well, I don't know if I have 1/8 of an inch here. Probably do, given the size of this design. So let's offset inward that 1/8 of an inch, but I do want to create sharp corners for this. That's why I chose it separately from my text. I want sharp corners for this. Let's offset it inward that 1/8 of an inch, and we're still in the clear. Excellent. All right, let's go ahead and, with that selected, let's grab Bob's Bait and Tackle, Ocala, Florida, in the outside of the bass. And these textures, or these vectors, these offsets, I want to separate them by putting them on its own layer. So I'm right clicking and move to layer, new layer, and I'm going to call this my texture offset. You can name it whatever you want. And so we can see some definition or difference in these things. Let's change the colors up. I'm going to make this red, and I'll keep it visible because I want to see it. We'll click OK. So now you can see all of those offsets are on that layer. And as I turn that layer on and off, you know, I can hide the visibility of that layer or have it on. You know, if I turn off layer 1, right, that's going to hide everything but my textures, right, my offsets. So this allows us to separate parts of our design to make things easier to work with. So now if I turn off layer 1, right, I can select everything. And that's the pattern. That's the pattern that I'm going to be creating my textures around, right? I don't need my actual design on or visible right now. It just makes things easier to work with. So let's go ahead and get back into that texture tool. Again, zero angle. I want to simulate some kind of grain running across here. Maximum spacing of those lines. Let's go with 1/8 of an inch. I might space that out to like a 1/2 inch. But let's look at 1/8 of an inch and see what it looks like first. And amplitude, I'm going to go 1/4 of an inch. 19 inches long. I want it to go from one end to the other. And a little bit of noise. Let's go ahead and preview that. There we go. All right, now we got some texture going on here. Let's go ahead and turn off the visibility of that texture offset layer. Turn that off and turn our design back on. And now you can see that texture lines are stopping that 1/8 of an inch away from my design. Now as I zoomed in, I also noticed something. I've got a little bit of cleanup to do in my font. You see that loop right there? We can't have a loop in our design, okay? Can't have loops and stuff in our text, so I'm going to have to fix that and clean that up. But now notice what in the world happened to Florida. Did I not have Florida selected? So how do we fix this? Oh my goodness, what do we do? I'm just going to temporarily hit cancel, make that texture go away for a minute. And this vector right here, I did not have it selected when I moved everything to that texture offset. So we're going to do that. And let's go ahead and do exactly what we did just a moment ago with our offsets turned on. And here they're red, so you can see the color of them. With everything selected, I'm just going to very simply reopen my texture tool and click preview. There we go. That way I don't have any texture around the word Florida. And how I observed that is the word Florida was covered with my blue texture lines, right? We don't want that. Now this time I'm going to keep this, so I'm going to click OK. It's locked in, all right? So we're going to keep that. Now let's turn off our offset lines and turn our design back on. Layer 1 is our design. And there we go. So we've got that distance around. So we're going to have this kind of design going on here. All right, let's go ahead and let's create some toolpaths so we can kind of see what we've got. I've been talking all this time, all this stuff, all that talk, guys and girls, just to make those vector lines, right? Geez Louise. Okay, so with this, let's go ahead and let's create our design. I'm going to select my border, my boundary here. Okay, I'm going to select Bob's Bait and Tackle, Ocala, Florida, and I want to create this toolpath so bad right now, but I can't. Remember, I said I have some cleanup I got to do on my font, so let's do that. So let's look and make sure. You see, I've got some overlap going on here. Looking good there. I got some overlap right there in the A and the I. Here in the I and the T. Got some cleanup to do there. All right. You might get dizzy with me going in and out, so I'll try not to do that too much. But let's look here. You see the loop in the C? So what we're going to do with this selected, we're going to come into our drawing tools here, and we're going to choose the option to convert. Convert the text to curves. Now I'm not curving the text. I'm not running it across a wavy line or something. I'm converting it to a curved object. So that is no longer text. I can't change my font, can't change my spelling, can't do anything. Once I convert to curves, it is now a vector object, meaning each of these items are individual vectors and things. All right. So what I want to do is let's start up here with Bob's, kind of focus in on Bob's, and it's going to be the S. And I'm going back over to my drawing tools here. So because now we're editing and all, we don't need our Toolpath open yet. We're not ready to create Toolpath, so we're going to stay on the left side for a moment. And I'm going to use my trim tool, interactive trim tool, and let's go ahead and trim this away. Oops. Now, look what happened. Let me zoom out. S is gone, right? When I trimmed, it cut everything. So either Control Z is an undo, right? That's an undo. We don't want, undo. But why did it go away? Why did it, when I clicked on it to cut, why did it delete it? Because it really didn't know what line that I wanted to cut because I was a little further out, so it got rid of everything. So zoom into it. Zoom in nice and tight and delete what you want. Now this little speck right here, we don't need it either. We're just trying to delete that loop. So if ever a part of your design deletes when you're trimming, zoom in and fix that. Okay, so Bob's Bait and Tackle. Bob's is good. Over here on the bait and tackle, on the T here, I've got some intersection going on. So I could have spaced these letters apart, right? I could have used my spacing tool. I could right now click on that T and move it over to the right. But what I'd like to do is I want to open this up. So I'm going to trim away this line here and here. I'm going to trim away this object here and here, this object here, even this little one. Now, if it doesn't let me delete that, which it did, if it didn't let me delete that, then I would just close my tool, select it, and hit the delete key on my keyboard. Now notice that even though my lines were intersecting, when I clicked that everything went away. I deleted everything. So Control Z is your best friend for undo. Notice my I is missing, so I got to undo that again. Control I, there you go. And when we have a vector that's being stubborn and stuff and all, and it's wanting to delete everything when we trims, get tight to it. Open that trim tool, and we should be able to trim away that. Now notice that when I trimmed that I still have this little overlap right here. That should go away when I close this tool. Those two ends should snap together when I close this tool, because I have rejoin trim sections automatically when the form is closed. I have that checked off. You should always have that checked off. But when I close, that should bring those two ends together and close off that vector. Okay? All right, so with that now, I've got to zoom in here, and we got to look at our fonts. If you got problem areas and stuff, overlaps and all, get rid of them. Get rid of those problem areas. So let's zoom in tight to this. Let's see if he's going to let me trim. All right, Control Z to undo. Zoom in a little bit tighter. Now, sometimes you can only go so far, right? If it's not going to let you trim, you can only go so far and stuff. In this case, if I'm trying to trim it away, it's wanting to delete everything, right? So I've got it. That tool's not working. It's not doing what I want it to do. All it did was rejoin that back together, So now we actually have to edit the object. So I'm going to go into node editing, edit objects, and node editing is the second icon. On here, I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to, right between these nodes, I'm going to put my mouse right on the line. I'm going to right click and I'm going to delete that span. Okay? And on here, I'm literally just going to pull this node up to this one and join it together there. And now when I select this should be a closed vector now, and we can test that. We can test it. If I click on this join tool right here, first icon, last row, if I open it up, I should have one closed vector selected. So it should have closed it automatically. So sometimes we got to go in and edit the objects. It's not the end of the world. Go in there and do a little bit of node editing and fix what needs to be fixed. All right, on this A here, let's zoom in. We got our overlap going on. Let's go ahead and use our trim tool and let's see if it'll let us trim it away. It did. Very simple. Done. And this is not an overlap or a loop or anything right here. That's just kind of a hook. Same thing down here. It's just kind of a hook. That's part of that font. What my eyes are looking at are overlaps and intersections like this here. We want to get rid of those. Okay, just a couple little trim, snip, snip. You know, snip, snip. All right, so Bob's bait and let's see here. Tackle up at the top. Look at there. And sometimes you got to go in. Now, is it going to make that big of a deal if I have an overlap and all? No, there may not. It may not cause an issue. Okay, but there might be a time where you go to do that preview and the letter just didn't carve. It's like, well, where'd it go? Why didn't it carve the T in this tackle and all? It's because there's some type of loop or overlap and everything that needs to be cleaned away. So let's take the time, and it's only 3 or 4 words. Let's go in there and look at it and let's knock it out, and then we're done. We only have to do this once because then we're going to use this design throughout all of this tutorial. All right, so my A, right? Usually if I have to trim one A, that means I'm going to have to trim the other. Get her done. All right. Let's see here. Down here, my C. Your eyes will start to get attracted to problem areas like right here. Right now, you might just see a line with a little dark spot right at the top of that line. This little curve right here, a little bump. Right? But if we zoom in, it's an overlap. Okay? It's an overlap. Intersection and an overlap. Now let's Control Z because it wants to delete it all. Can it let me go in any further? Let's find out and see if we can trim that away. No, it's still wanting to delete. So just like we did last time, close that tool. Go into node editing. Click on your vector. When it pops up the nodes, I'm just very simply going to delete the span. The line between line arc or curve, the line between 2 nodes is called a span. So when I right click on this, I'm going to delete that span. And then I'm very simply just going to grab this node and pull it over to this one. Now, is that going to be the case every single time? Am I always going to grab one node and pull it over to another? Yes and no. Because it might, that moving that line may affect your design in a way that you don't want it to look. You know, it might affect the shape that you're trying to create or what have you. But in this case, this text has got this kind of random patterns going on, and moving that line over, creating this little curve, a little bit more of a curve here, is not going to hurt this design for me at all. So I'm going to come in here and delete this span. I'm simply going to move this over and connect it to there. Okay, we're almost there, almost there. All this little tedious stuff you got to do. If there's fonts you want to use, then you're going to have to deal with them. All right. See how we zoomed in there? That looked like a little slice, but it's actually an overlap or an intersection. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Boom. When I click on it, the K is gone, right? The K is gone. Isn't that the thrill is gone? Not the K is gone. The thrill is gone. All right, let's go into node editing. Let's click on this here. I'm going to delete this long span between these 2 nodes. And this guy here, since this one here, I'm just actually going to pull him up, try to keep it in the same alignment, and then snap to that green one. All right, done. So you're getting a lesson not only in node editing, and that's just an actual curve. There's no overlaps here. That's kind of like a little slash. But you're getting a little lesson here in node editing because there's going to be times where you've got to do it, right? You're getting a lesson in trimming. There's going to be times you got to do it. So don't sit here and say, Laney, move on, man. We know how to do this. If you do, you probably do if you've been with me a while, but the new ones don't. So we're going to spend some time and clean up this font. All right, that's just a little gouge, but right here, down here, if we zoom in, bam. Trim tool. Will it let me trim it? I'm going to zoom in as tight as I can. Let's see here. Bam, there's 1, 2. Oh, Number 3. Oh, number 3. So undo and close that tool and it'll pull it together automatically if it's close enough within tolerance. Excellent. Perfect, perfect. Okay. Last one. E is looking... You're like, holy cow, how do you see that? Your eyes will start to adapt to your fonts and your letters and your lines and stuff, and you'll start to see little anomalies. You'll be able to see little anomalies and everything. Close that tool. Let's make sure those snap together. Got a little line there. That's awesome. That's kind. I'll leave it because that's what the rest of my font looks like, so that's fine. All right, up here at the top, another one, and this should be it. And I believe we might have a little cleanup to do on Ocala, Florida, and we're done. Now zoom in and, you know, but don't go clicking like crazy. Like right now, I'm clicking like 1, 2, 3 times already and nothing's happening. So, you know, make sure that you zoom back out. Make sure that when those clicks and all, that nothing disappeared that should have, that shouldn't have. You know, like you didn't accidentally delete lines, because it's terrible to go through all of these changes and stuff and then come back and go, well, shoot, where did my I go up in the first letter that you worked on? And you got to undo everything to go back. So kind of get a full look at. Right now I'm clicking, nothing, right? Nothing's happening. And why isn't it happening? Well, is it an intersection? Yes, it is, because when I click on it, it selects everything. If that triangle was by itself, then I would just delete that triangle, but it selected the whole letter. So I do have to go into node editing. Now I've talked to you about deleting the span and bringing the 2 endpoints together, which is what we're going to do here. But you know, you could always just move this node out past this one, right? Get rid of that loop if you wanted to. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to stay consistent. I'm going to delete the span. That's the line between the 2 nodes, and then I'm going to pull this one to match there. Okay? All right. I think you've seen enough of that. So now let's race through. Now you get the point. Now I'm going to race through this last one and get Ocala done, because we could spend an hour on friggin' node editing. All right, so Florida and all is clean because I used a different font, so I didn't think I would have any problems there. So Ocala, Florida's good. All right, so we've got rid of our overlaps, we got rid of our loops and everything. We're golden, golden child. All right, let's go ahead and select our border. Let's select Bob's Bait and Tackle, but wait a minute, look at there. Oh, does that mean I have to hold down my shift key and select all of these fonts one by one? No, we do one time, right? So let's go ahead and select all of our vectors, right, for Bob's. And then let's go over with Bob's. I want these separate. I'll keep them separate lines still. But Bob's, with it all selected, let's go over there and group it together. That means that way now I can just click on it and it'll select everything at one time, right? So we got to do it one time. Let's click on our B, our A, our and sign, tackle. I'm selecting on the inside and the outside of the vectors. And let's group that together. And then of course Ocala, Florida, O-C-A. My little comma there as well. Once we get this design cleaned up, which it is now we can start rocking with our design and our textures and all that, moldings and everything. So let's go ahead and get on to this, because we're already at 8:22. We're already an hour into it, and all we've done is make some lines. Let's group that together. All right, now with that selected, with those 3 things grouped, I'm going to click on Bob's. I'm going to hold down my shift key, click on Bait and Tackle on Ocala, Florida. And I'm going to go ahead and grab the outside border of my bass and my outside border rectangle. We're going to come over here and we're going to create a V-carve toolpath. Now, when I create this toolpath, I've got this border selected as well. That means these letters and everything are going to be raised up and all. So we want that, but we also, my bass is going to kind of carve a little funky looking when I carve him, because he's going to be raised up, but a V-carve toolpath is going to cut between the lines, meaning it's cutting between this line and the line of my S, right? It's going to carve all this area away and pocket it out. And let's turn off the texture so you understand what I'm talking about. I don't want you to be confused by the texture. So on my design, this V-carve toolpath, when I choose my border, it's going to cut between the lines, cutting between the border and between my letters, carving around them, giving them that raised look effect. But on my bass, I have internal vectors in here, meaning it's going to cut around the bass here. It's going to skip here and go in here and cut inside of these fins away and everything. And it's going to skip every kind of other set of lines, you know. And so everything, all these veins, or not veins, but these stripes and stuff, they're all going to be raised, while the body, the main body of my bass, is going to be carved away. And I don't want that, okay? I want my bass to carve its profile. I want all of this fin here to be kind of raised up. Let me show you what it looks like if I don't do anything about it. Let's calculate this toolpath. I'm going to start at 0. I'm using a flat depth of 1/8 of an inch, my 60-degree V-bit, and because I have a flat depth limiting this cut, this V-cut here, I can use a flat area clearance tool. So I'm going to select, and for me, I'm going to use my 1/8 inch end mill. I want to kind of get close and tight within these letters and stuff. So I'm going to use my 1/8 inch end mill to do the flat work. And I'm going to click OK. So I've got a 0 start depth, 1/8 of an inch flat depth, 60-degree V-bit, my 1/8 of an inch end mill. When I calculate this toolpath, what am I missing? Well, let's open that back up. I'm missing the rest of my bass, like a goofball. I need to select everything, my bass too. All the inside stuff too. Calculate. Alright, so when I calculate this toolpath, and we preview, I've got 2 files here now, one for my end mill, one for my V-bit. When I preview this visible toolpath, we're going to have that raised effect. But the bass, he's not going to get the way that we like. So this is my pocket cut, cutting all the pockets. That's the end mill bit running. And then, you know, now the V-carve bit is going to come and do all the V-carving and all and everything. So it doesn't look bad, right? You know, it's not too bad, but I don't want all of this stuff carved away with just the stripes being raised. I want it reversed. I want all of this raised up with the stripes and the outline being carved away and stuff. So I have to create another line, another profile around my bass to reverse that cut. So let's come in here and let's select our bass. We're going to offset, and I'm going to offset just 1/16 of an inch away. Okay. Now, I'm only going 1/16 of an inch, a small amount, but remember my vector textures, I did 1/8 of an inch offset around the bass already, right? If we turned on that offset and everything, we got that red line where my texture is going to stop. Well, that means that when I carve this, when I create that 1/16 of an inch offset, when I do the texture, my texture is going to stop within 1/16 of an inch, right? Because I went 1/8 of an inch only, so it's going to stop within 1/16 of an inch of my bass outline. And remember what our number was, 0.0722, right? That when I drew that V bit. So that means that my bit is going to hit on that bass. So I've got to redraw this red outline here for the texture as well. So by making this one change, I've got to make 2. Let's do one at a time. Select the border, offset outward. I'm going to go 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625. I do not want sharp corners. I do not want to delete the original. I want to select the new one. I'm going to click offset. So now I've got this new offset line here. Okay, that 1/16 of an inch away. With that being done, let's come in here and turn on our offsets for our textures, and let's click on it, make it active, because I'm about to create a new one. I'm going to come in here, and on this bass, the one that's red, that texture, I'm going to delete it because it's no good for me anymore. I'm going to delete it, and I'm going to select my new offset line out here, and I'm going to go outward my 1/8 of an inch because I still want my texture to be an 1/8 of an inch away. So offset. All right, now there we go, just created a new line. And the reason why that line, when I drew it, became red, because I'm in my offset layer that I created for my texture offsets. We're talking about offsets, and you're hearing the word offset, offset here, offset there, offset a 1/16, offset an 1/8. Oh my God, Lainey, so many offsets. What are you talking about? Well, don't let it drive you nuts. All we did in the simplest terms as possible is I want my texture toolpath to be an 1/8 of an inch away from my design. Since I changed my design of my bass and made this new line 1/16 inch away from my original profile, I needed to delete my old outline here and make it an 1/8 of an inch from my new border around my bass. Hopefully that made some kind of sense. All right, all that being said, let's go in here and turn that off and go back into our design here. And I'm going to open up that toolpath. And what you saw me click real fast was I just double clicked on this toolpath that was created a moment ago. I'm just double clicked it, and that opens it up for editing. I could also right click and choose edit. Okay, either one, but I'm opening this back up because I need to add this new line into this toolpath. So I'm going to hold down my shift key and select that, and I can click calculate. Now, let it calculate that out. Reset my preview, and let's preview those two toolpaths. They're visible. I can see the blue and red lines. That means they're checked off here. So I'm just going to click the button that says preview visible toolpath. Now, since we've got layers, right? We've got layers for the texture, and we've got layers for our design and stuff, and we're using that design layer to create this toolpath. Everything on that design layer we're creating this toolpath from, and all. Let that finish carving out. Okay, that's what I want. Let's turn off that color. We don't want that color on right now, so you can see the design and everything. That's what I want for the bass. I wanted all that stuff raised up, and I just wanted the outline kind of carved around. Now, that 1/16 of an inch offset, that's this guy right here. That's this little wall around here. So if you want it wider, make it wider. But all I wanted was that little 1/16 of an inch offset. Now, since that layer, right, is my design, what I just created that toolpath on, if we open that text toolpath back up, and I manually selected those vectors, right? When we were in the drawing, I manually came over here and I selected the vectors and I calculated the toolpath. Well, what are layers good for? Not only to separate the designs, but we can also associate a toolpath with a particular layer. So on this toolpath here, if I hit my selector tool, if I say, okay, I want you to select all the open vectors and the closed vectors and associate them, associate this toolpath with all of the vectors that are on, and let me move this to the side so you can see what happens. All of the vectors that are on layer 1, see how it selects them all? And if I close this and click calculate, you'll see it says automatic now here instead of manual. And with that automatic selection, if I make any change in that layer 1, it'll automatically be, I can recalculate that toolpath, it'll automatically be updated. I don't have to go back and select it. I can just hit the recalculate button if I have to change that toolpath or recalculate it. I can click that and it'll recalculate that on everything that's on that layer. So I've associated that layer with this toolpath. I don't want to get too far, but all right. So we're good there. Now let's put some texture into this bad boy. Let's go in here and turn off, let's go to our 2D design. Let's turn off layer 1. I'm turning layers, I'm working with layers here. Let's turn on our Toolpath texture for our texture offset here. I'm not even going to select anything, right? I'm going to click on that, and let's turn on both layers so you can see how the texture selection works. We haven't done our texturing tool. Let's turn that one on too. There we go. So now, what happened here? Why are my lines inside of my vector on my bass? Remember, we created this new border. So those lines weren't recalculated, you know, they weren't recreated for that border. So we're going to do that. We're going to do that. Okay. Let's first off, that texture, right click, it's selected, it's pink. When it's pink, it's selected. Okay, it's all grouped together. Let's right click and delete. Get rid of it. Okay, because we have a new boundary. Select everything here. Texture tool. All the parameters are the same. I'm not changing anything. I'm just re-previewing it. So that way it draws to my new line. And then click OK. So I had to recreate those texture lines. If you make changes in your design, most likely you're going to have to go back and, you know, update or make a change in some other area of that design. So with all of my active layers on, I don't need the dimension layer anymore because that was when I was drawing that V. Bitmap layer, will leave it off. So of my active layers here, meaning that I have something on them, some kind of data on them, my layer 1 is active when it's bold, you know. That one's active now, this one's active now, but of those three, all three lights are on, meaning they're all three visible in here. And I've already got this toolpath has already been created on the design. You can see what vectors are selected, right? Now we're going to go in and create our texture toolpath, this guy right here. Let's go into our texturing tool. And for this texture, my cut depth in that pocket area was 1/8 of an inch deep, right? So I want, that's where I want to start. So start depth is going to be 1/8 of an inch. For my tool, I like using an 1/8 inch ball nose end mill. Okay? I like running this end mill. And the ball nose, it gives kind of a hand chiseled look. So I'm going to choose my 1/8 inch tapered ball nose. It's kind of just my go-to bit. For this cut here, I want to try to simulate some wood grain. So I've already got my vector lines right here. So I'm going to associate this texturing toolpath with that vector pattern. Okay? With that selected vector pattern, which is this pink selection that I've got here. Now, with that being said, it only gives me the option to really texture settings that I can work with is my maximum and minimum cut. Now I can ramp at the start and the end. I'm not going to ramp with this. I'm doing a light texture. So on this cut depth, I'm going to let it vary and randomize it on. I'm going to go about 0.2. Let's see here, I'm going to stick with my 1/8 of an inch and 1/16 of an inch variance. We'll play around with it and all, but I'm going to go, that's the maximum I want to cut from that 1/8 of an inch pocket. All right, so that's all I can do. I can't offset and everything. That's why we created that offset lines already. Notice how it's offset from our design. So let's calculate this, and this is going to be texture 1. We'll just leave it that. All right, now when you're looking at that toolpath preview, a lot of people freak out when they see this part, and they're like, whoa, wait a minute, does that mean it's carving my design? My toolpath is like showing over my design. When you're looking at this part of the preview, you're looking at your toolpath lines where that bit's going to be cutting. The blue lines are where you're carving. The red lines are where the router is above the material moving from point A to B. And the green lines are where the router's raising up and down. So the red lines are where the router's above the material moving from one place to another. And the green lines are where you're going up and down, and the blue lines are where it's carving. So it's not carving into your design. That's just the router jumping over that design and stuff. So let's go ahead and turn that off, right? So there's without the texture. Here's with the texture. Let's see what we created here. All right, let's turn that color off. Now, it's okay. Nothing wrong with it. I could change up the lines if I want. I could change up the pattern. I could change up the cut depth and all that stuff. You know, if I'm trying to simulate some type of wood grain, let's look at this front on, head on and stuff. You know, kind of like almost like a deteriorated board or something, you know, with a little bit of randomness. I might increase the spacing a bit, right? Since I'm using an 1/8 inch ball nose bit. I may increase the spacing on that here. So let's do that. Let's change it up a bit. So let's go back into our 2D view, and I'm going to make my texture tool lines active because that's what I'm about to delete, right? If I click on this on my texture tool lines, oh, something got moved. Hang tight. Let me see where my textures are. Yep, I gotta move those bad boys. Okay, no, they're there. They were, it wouldn't let me select them, guys and girls. It wouldn't let me select them because I had the tool open. So let me select them first and delete. I'm just deleting them, right? Because I'm going to change up the pattern a bit. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and let's turn off the design for a minute because this is what I'm creating that texture on. Select it. And for this, let's change the angle up a bit. Let's go about 7 degrees. Maximum line spacing. Let's go if I'm using a 1/8 inch ball nose, let's go about 1/4 of an inch on our line spacing, maybe even a half, but let's go 1/4, and let's give it a little bit of a variance. Okay, on the amplitude and everything, let's bring this amplitude up. Let's bring that up to 1/2 an inch. Same length and same noise. Let's go ahead and preview that. Okay, got a little bit of a 7-degree pattern going on there. All right, 7-degree angle. All right, now here's the great thing. Let's click OK, lock that in. Now, because I associated, did I associate my texture with it? Let's look. It's manual. I didn't associate. You guys should have called me on that one. Hey, what about associating that toolpath? Associate this toolpath with everything that's on the texture tool line. Click close. And I want to use that selected vectors as the pattern. The cut depth was fine for me, so I'll keep that there, and let's calculate this. Reset that preview and preview all the toolpaths. Let's see what we create. Thanks, William. Have a great day. Hey, Jerry. Sorry, I'm late to the layout of my design. All right, let's go here and, all right, so, yeah, you know, a little bit better for me anyway. Now, okay, here's the deal. I want to show you how to use this vector texture tool, okay? But with me, be honest with you, I never use it. There's never a reason why I would use it unless I was trying to simulate some kind of grain pattern and all. And this would look better, or much more like a grain pattern with a V-bit than it would a ball nose. Unless this is kind of an oak, right? You know how oak has got that real rough bark look, like if I'm trying to simulate bark or something and all that. I don't use these vector texture tools. So let's look at this texture that was created using the texturing toolpath with these lines that were created by the texture tool. Now let's compare that to just using the texturing toolpath without those vectors. So with that being said, let's go over to our 2D design. Let's turn off those texture tool lines, right? Turn our design on. Actually, we don't need this line. We don't need our offset layer on either, you know, because the texturing toolpath, when I use it, all of Bob's bait and tackle, the outside border of the bass and the outside border. When I use the regular just texturing toolpath by itself, I can randomize. So I'm gonna go with this. My favorite pattern for this is maximum cut depth 1/8 of an inch, minimum cut depth 1/16 of an inch. Maximum cut line, we're gonna go with a 1 inch with a minimum of a little under a 1/16. My overlap here, I'm gonna go with a 30% overlap. Step over, I step over half the diameter of my bit. My bit is an 1/8 inch ball nose, I'm gonna step over a 1/16. And on my line angle, I'm gonna go with a 10-degree line angle. Now here is where I can say, hey, stay away from my boundaries, right? Everything I got selected, and I'm gonna stay away from those boundaries by 1/8 of an inch. Now when I calculate this toolpath, now it's gonna take these parameters that I could program in, and it's gonna create a randomized pattern. All right, yes we can. We haven't gotten there yet, David. Let's reset this preview back to a blank board, and let's go ahead and preview our design again and our new texture. So preview the visible toolpath. I'm about to blow y'all's mind here in a second. Hold on. Don't get ahead of me. No, yes, you can, David. We're going to talk about that just now here in a second because that's going to be the kind of thing we're talking about. All right, Bob's bait and tackle. There's our V carve in our pocket. Now here comes our texture. Okay. All right. Here comes our texture. Here comes our texture. Here comes our texture. Here comes our texture. Now when you're watching this texture and everything, and you notice something, it's like, man, oh wow, oh wow. Oh, I wonder if I could. I wonder if I could. And somebody's going to ask the question because somebody's already asked the question to me once before. Hey, what if I wanted that, because it almost looks like the bass is jumping out of the water. What if I wanted to only carve that texture halfway across the board or something, or you know, make it look like a horizon line, right? Like a river or lake horizon line. You can kind of get a visual what it was looking like when it was carving. It's like, oh, that actually looks good. So this looks, to me, it looks good, but let's I'd like it to have a horizon line. I want it to be a line kind of coming at an angle here, like this bass is jumping out of the water. And so in my design, right, in my design here, I'm going to create a new layer, add a new layer up here on this layer. I'm going to drop it down, add a new layer, and I'm going to call this my horizon. You can name it whatever you want. I'm just kind of being creative. Horizon texture. All right. And yes, if you want to prevent shallow cuts between the letters on Tennessee wood signs, if you want to do that, use your boundaries, your offset boundaries, and don't select your actual text. Okay? If I were to use my offset boundaries right around my text, then my texture cannot go into the letters or between the letters. All right? So that's how you would prevent that. All right, so for this, let's go ahead and with that new layer selected, I'm going to draw a rectangle. Let's go right about here. Same size as my frame here, right? But now I'm going to go into node editing, and on this here, I'm going to bring this angle up a bit, about right about there. And on this side here, kind of go off right about there. So we're going to have this kind of half texture at this angle. Now, on this half texture, remember what I said about overlaps and all? We can't have them. Can't have them at all. So here's what we need to do. On this horizon texture, which is only this shape right now, right? I created that layer and all. We're going to add a couple of things to that layer. So the first thing I'm going to add to that layer is the outside of the bass. The outside of the bass, I'm going to make a copy. I'm not moving it, I'm copying it to that horizon texture. Okay? On my bait and tackle, since my bait and tackle is inside that texture area as well as the Ocala, Florida, I'm going to select that as well. Okay? And I'm going to make a copy of that. Copy to layer, horizon texture. Let's turn off the entire design so you can see what we're working with here. So now we have this. Now I've got to create my boundary. So I'm going to use my trim tool, and this is only a copy, so I'm not cutting the actual perimeter of the bass. It's a copy. That's why we copy. I'm going to trim this away because it's outside of my boundary area, right? And I'm going to trim that away. Don't need it. Over here on the bait and tackle, zoom in nice and tight. The top of the B, can't trim none of that. It's grouped. You can't trim a grouped object. Click on bait and tackle and ungroup it. Okay? Ungroup it. Now, when I ungrouped that just now, it actually, and I turned on this layer, it moved everything. It moved the bait and tackle back over to my layer 1 because I wasn't active. Let me undo that. Okay, Control Z. Let me undo that. And when I right click on this, when you're ungrouping an object, it really has an option to, ungroup back onto the original object layer or ungroup onto the groups layer. Well, it's on this here is a copy, and it's on its own layer here. Okay, so if I choose this tool to ungroup and I see a dotted line with a solid black line behind it, that means it ungrouped onto the original layer that it was actually on, because instead of the copied layer, the new layer. And that means I've just created a duplicate. And if you don't catch that and you're like, well, doggone it, what happened there? And you keep ungrouping, you're going to create building up duplicates and duplicates and duplicates and stuff. So I'm going to undo this, okay, our undo button. And I'm going to turn that original layer back off. Now, this design here, okay, this design should be on this layer, right? It is. So when I turn that on and off, it's there. So instead of using the ungroup tool, which is causing me to have a duplicate, I'm going to select this, and I should be able to go into ungroup objects back onto the original objects layer or undo onto the groups layer. So which one do I want to do? Well, I actually want to ungroup onto the groups layer, and that would be what the original layer I don't want, right? Because that's where it's going. So if I use that, then, I don't want to confuse you guys. Hold on a second. When I choose this ungroup, which is not active anymore, let me undo this. Undo. When I choose to ungroup, I don't want to ungroup back onto the original object layer. That's what it was doing, and it was throwing everything back on that layer 1 that I copied this from. I want to ungroup it onto the groups layer, meaning the layer it's currently on right now. And so we should get a clean dotted line with no copies. Okay, so if this tool messes with you, right? Our ungroup tool messes with you, and you're like, why is it creating all these duplicates every time I ungroup? Don't use the tool. Just right click and choose the appropriate option from the menu. Okay. All right. Now, all that being said, let's go back and trim away our B, right? Our A, I. Can you smell what the rock is cooking? All right, got to zoom in tight on this one. Oops, don't go that far back. All right, good enough. Okay, so now this is going to be my new vector boundary for this texture, right? So let's create a new texture. So up here, texturing toolbar, same parameters, same 1/8 of an inch offset. This time I'm going to select this guy here manually, right? I could do it manually and calculate this right now, or we got it, why not use it, right? Associate this with every vector that's on the horizon texture layer, right? And that way it's automatically selecting it and it's associating this toolpath with it. So it, if I recalculate all my toolpaths or if I change something on my layers, it's gonna, do what it's gonna do. All right, reset this back to a blank preview. Let's look at our sign without a texture. Preview the visible toolpath. So here we go as our raised design. Yeah, it happens. Tennessee, you're like, man, why is it creating duplicates? Every time I'm ungrouping, it'll turn on that other layer and it's not even on that layer. I've got my layer active. I've got, I'm using a copy. Why is it creating duplicates and everything? And it happens, it'll do it. So we just got to right click on it and say, ungroup to the group layer, meaning the layer it's currently on right now. All right. So, all right, once again, we had our Bob's Bait and Tackle, right? Decent sign in itself, nothing wrong with it, but let's add that horizontal texture in there. Let's see how we do with that and how that looks, right? And this little 10-degree, 1-inch distance and all kind of gives me like a windy day on a lake where I grew up in Ocala, Florida, Lake Weir. Really choppy waters and all. And everything, and that's the effect that I feel that I get with this is a kind of the hand chiseled tight look and everything. All right, so let's look at this here with our kind of our horizontal sign. You know what I mean? Like almost like he's jumping out of the water. Right. Now if I painted this, I don't know if I would paint the texture, blue or something, give it a little bit different color and everything, but I can't simulate that unless I come in and associate a color with a particular toolpath, right? So if I came in here and that texturing toolpath, that texture 3, if I made it kind of a watery blue, light blue or something, right? We kind of see that. And then the V-carve cut and this. Let's do one at a time. Let's see here because I want to see how well it screws it up. Border outline, a little bit of that looks good. And let's see what we want the rest to be. We'll go kind of a light gray. Right? I don't know. You guys get the idea. Right? Righto, mate. Alright, so your texture doesn't have to take up the whole background is the whole point of that story. Create a boundary. You're going to create, like if you're doing shapes, forget signs, right? Let's say I'm doing a heart-shaped gift box for Valentine's Day, which is right around the corners, and on the lid of that box, let's say I'm cutting out a little heart-shaped box, or what have you, a little keepsake and stuff. And on that lid, I want half the heart to have kind of a nice little texture on it. Whether it's just a random pattern texture or maybe it's one of these V-carve textures or whatever. But I want half the heart, a nice little curve or something to have that kind of texture on it or what have you. right down the middle to represent almost like, so it looks like two halves of two different hearts making one, right? You and your hubby, two halves of each heart makes one type of thing. Whatever, you know what I mean? Kind of get that look. And you know, you could, you know, whatever the case may be. Now you can also look at this in other types of woods and all. Let's say I wanted this kind of in a piece of cherry or what have you. You know, what my sign would look like. You know, my sky might be a lighter blue than my lake. Who knows? You never know. I'm just kind of simulating the color so you can see the difference in the two. But then, of course, we can also view it without the color, right? So we can see what it looks like. And for preview purposes only, the maple's good. Okay, so play around with your textures, okay? Have some fun with them. You don't always have to fill that texture across your whole design, your whole sign. Create a vector, create a pattern, create a, you know, a part of your sign. Texture just it. You know, play around with it. Have some fun. I could have just done a horizon line straight across, right? A rectangle straight across, you know, and done it all that. But I want kind of an angle, right? Like almost like I'm looking off into a little bit of a distance and all or something, you know, a little bit of an angle. Like maybe I'm standing closer to this shore than I am way over here. Whatever, you know, perspective and all that stuff. So now, good looking sign. Nothing wrong with it at all. But since we're on textures, before we get to moldings, I do want to talk to you about the molding toolpath here in a moment. But let's look at what other options we have for textures. Let's close this and let's reset this preview back to a blank board right now for the moment. Let's reset that back to a blank board. And let's come back over here and let's see what we have options for textures. Well, under our clip art, right? Clip art, we can actually, in the clip art gallery, we should have some texture area tiles and texture area non-tileable options, right? What does that mean for us? Well, let's go ahead and let's turn off this layer, and I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm adding layers because I want you guys and girls to start understanding about, you don't have to add layers. You can put everything all on one layer, right? You don't have to separate things. But by separating things by layers, it makes it easier for me to work with them, you know, the items I want to work with and stuff, you know, and everything. It just kind of makes it easy for me. So on this layer, I'm going to create this as a, I'm going to just call it clip art texture, right, just to kind of keep it separate. Now, for this, in the clip art, the non-tileable texture options, we have some rivers, wave looking textures, brick walls, sticks and stones and rocks and barks, leaves, right? Leaves, grass, green, cracked earth type textures, basket weaves and bark for tree barks and stuff. You know, so we have all kinds of, you know, water textures, you know, like we were saying, and all that we could use. So let's drop a water texture in here. Now notice that nothing happened, right? I dropped that texture in, boom, but nothing happens. Because you see these arrows right here, that means that these textures are not yet on my computer, right? They're in my Vectric cloud space and everything. So I need to log into my Vectric account. So I'm going to go to Help, Visit Vectric User Portal. That's our account, our user portal. Okay. And on that user portal, bear with me, I'm trying to pull it over here. On that user portal, we go to our account and we scroll down and we log in, you know, whatever it may be, whatever your, you know, whatever name you registered with, and whatever password you created, you're going to log in with that. All right. Don't be looking at my password now. Let's see here. Can't even remember my password. Don't you hate that when that happens? Now that I'm logged in, okay, now that I'm logged into my account, minimize that. I should be able to drag and drop this, or let's see here, download. Unable to download clip art, not entitled to this clip art. Please refresh your library. Status 9. Not entitled. Am I not entitled to this library? I might be in my Aspire library. Bear with me a second, because I'm in VCarve Pro, but I've got 3 different programs on here. I know I'm entitled to this library. Unable to download clip art. Well, that's all right. Let me find another. Let me look at my models and make sure that I'm. I might not be entitled to this library like y'all are because of my license style. Let me see here. Alright, so I'm in VCarve Pro. Two-D vectors. Weaves, ribbons, tile, tabs, animals, borders, decorative objects, and people. Alright, so I don't have that library, so I can't access it. Only in my Aspire maybe that I'll be able to access it. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to show that freaking texture option. That's all right. Let me look at my Aspire. Let me see if I have access to it in Aspire, because I have all the programs, because I teach in all the programs. So let me look here. Stand by. $21, 11.25, 3/4, working off the machine bed in the center for right now. Click OK. Clip art. Let's maximize this up. Clip art. Okay, yeah, that's because that's my Aspire. All right, so we're going to use Aspire for a moment because that's the only place I have access to this library of all. All right, so with the texture for tiles, these models here, like this is bark. So if we look at our 3D view, you know, we have this bark. We could fill up our whole board with it. We could, let's go down to that waves. Let's see if that waves, water one, right? Let's delete this and let's go to water 1. Let's see what that one looks like. So that's kind of their water pattern. All right. So we could use that. Now with Aspire, I have the ability to remove parts of a model and everything. If I wanted to do that horizon line and all that stuff, I could, again, you know, I could use that part of that model. So if I wanted to do that, I would basically draw my rectangle. Let's go into the 2D view. Go into my node editing. And with that rectangle selected, as well as that boundary, in the modeling tools of Aspire, I can remove or clear everything on the outside of that boundary away. Okay, so I can, you know, if I wanted to just texture one part of my board for whatever reason or another, right? Now, if I were using Aspire, for those of you that do have Aspire and everything, most likely, if I'm going to do a model, I'm going to go all out with it type of deal, rather than the VCarve raised design and stuff. I would most likely, let me go back to my metric. Let's go back to our design here. I'm going to copy this. Copy. And in my Aspire, I'm going to paste. Is it going to let me paste? Maybe I can't pay. Oh, I can't. Ah, daggone, I can't do that either. You son of a gun. I can copy and paste from one VCard Pro to another, but I can't do it from Pro to Aspire. Unfair. Unfair. Okay. Not unfair. I'm kidding. All right. So that's one way of texturing, right? Well, since we're in the Aspire, let's kind of jump over here just for a minute before we get into molding, because we're already 2 hours into this now. But since we're here, let's go ahead and I'm going to export this design, file export as a DXF. And I'm going to call this my fishing design. And now in my Aspire software, I can import that DXF. Rather than copy and paste, I can just simply import it from my desktop, texture and molding, fishing design import. Okay. Now, with that, let's go ahead. I don't want my border, I don't want my texture here, this wave texture to go outside my border, right? So let's select that border and let's select the texture, and it's a model type texture, so let's clear the outside. Don't clear everything outside of that vector, right? So it's just on the inside here. And now I'm going to create a shape. So from Bob's Bait and Tackle and from this border right here, just the outside border of the bass, I could do the whole bass, but I'm just going to do the outside border of the bass. I'm going to create a shape, and this is only Aspire that I can do this in, okay? I'm going to create a, I want my letters and everything to have kind of a round over, even these guys and all, I want to have a round over. So I'm going to go with a high percentage, 75 to 90%. I'll stick with 80 here. I'll give this about a quarter of an inch, eighth to a quarter of an inch base height. We'll see what it looks like in just a second when it creates it. But I want to limit that height, meaning that I want to flatten it off. It's going to round over the edges and then flatten off the top. And I'm going to limit that height to an eighth of an inch and click apply. When I do that, let's go to a split screen right now. Okay, when I do that, well, let's actually go to our 3D view altogether. That text and everything is taking on the texture. I don't want that. Okay, I don't want it taking on the texture. So I'm going to merge, not add. I'm going to merge with that so I have my flat layer. And my letters at a quarter of an inch base height, they're not quite reaching the top of the water. Or the waves and everything, because my model's texture is a little thick and all. So we're going to raise that up some more. So we're going to raise that up. Okay, so now my text and everything is clearing that background and everything. And if we look at the text, so right now it's kind of a small round over, right? There's not much to it. It's barely just rounding over to that flat top of that text. So I'm going to reduce this limit height. I'm going to limit this to a 1/16 of an inch and click apply. And it should give me a nice round over on my edges. Okay. Maybe that's a little much of a round over. Let's kind of back that. Let's find a happy medium. Let's go 0.09. We'll go 0.09. Put a decimal in there, Laney. 0.0925 and click apply. Woo. Woo doggy. Yeah, I want that base height back up. Let's get that base height back. It's all about that base. No, I'm just kidding. Let's get that base height back up, and I want to limit this. I'm going to go with that 0.07. That's it. I'm going to just go with 0.07. All right. That's going to give me this rounded over edge here, and then that flat top of my design. Okay, so with that, that's going to be my design there. Now I would have you know, my border, right? My border. Oh, dadgummit. Always when you're creating a shape and stuff like that and everything, don't just close the tool. On any tool, not just in Inspire, everything. So always click OK. Confirm, right? Confirm. Click OK, and I want to merge, not add. Click apply to lock it in, right? Or OK if it has the option for OK. Do that, you know, before you close. Okay. And you should have your model there, that grayscale right there. All right, now, so we've got those two elements. Now on my rectangle here, I need to offset it outward that 1 inch. I'm going back 1 inch with this. This time I want to not delete the original. I want to keep it, but I'm going to offset it outward 1 inch and create sharp corners. All right, that'll give me this outside border here. Okay, so with that border, with those two borders selected, we're going to come in and create a shape, and I'm going to use the same parameters for this. No, I'm not. I want just a flat shape. Just a flat shape, and let's go with 0.3 as well. Click apply. That way it's the top, reaching the top surface of my frame and everything. And I want to merge. Don't want to add, you want to merge. All right. So now you're like, well, where's the bass? Where's the bass? Now I could finish modeling the bass and everything, but I'm actually going to be V-carving the bass in here. So that's why I just created the island when I created that shape and everything. And last but not least, on this boundary here is I got all this white open space right there, which there's nothing in there right now. I'm going to create a rectangle, and this is not the intended class, but I had to draw out the design so I could create it. I'm going to create a rectangle here. I'm going to go into node editing mode in that rectangle, and I'm going to pull this angle down so I'm overlapping my other model that's down below, my waves. And with that rectangle, I'm going to create a shape. This shape is going to be a flat shape. It's only going to be about 1/16 of an inch thick, if that, 0.0625. And I want to add, we'll merge this one, merge it as well, click apply. And what I've just done there is I've created a background in there of wood. Okay, so if I close this, if I turn that background off, right, I don't have anything back there. You know, I have a hole type of deal. So I'm creating that 1/16 of an inch background, right, so I don't cut into my table. All right, with this, let's create a quick toolpath on this, and I'm just gonna do a 3D finish toolpath, And I'm going to use a 1/8 of an inch tapered ball nose. I'm going to use the material. No, I'm going to use the selected vectors as the boundary. My frame is flat, right? So I'm going to use the selected vectors as a boundary. And I'm going to select my boundary line that goes all the way around. That whole area right there, because all that's modeled in there. I'm going to select that rectangle. Notice that it's pink right here, right? Notice that it's pink. It's selected all the way around. This other rectangle that goes in an angle that I got, that's a different one. So it's going to calculate this toolpath. All right. Yeah, no problem, Resorter. I can understand. See you guys. See you, John. See everybody. Rochelle, you know I reversed the bass to make it stand out rather than only have the lines raised. How did you reverse the bass? Reverse for the bass only? Excellent question. So Rochelle, all I did was on the actual bass, on his original outline. I just selected his original outline. And then I offset that outline outward, and it was for the offset to reverse him, it was only a 1/16 of an inch offset. So it's just a very small one, you know. And when offsetting that created this line here. Oops, this one here. Okay, so I created that 1/16 of an inch offset. And that way it was, it reversed the design and everything. All right, this is almost done calculating. While that's going on and calculating and stuff, let's talk about moldings real quick and everything. The molding toolpath is a versatile toolpath that can, because I want a picture frame molding around this picture. You know, I'm back in VCarve Pro. I want a picture frame molding around this picture, and so we're going to talk about the molding toolpath. The molding toolpath, not the prism carbon, the molding toolpath here, I have to have a boundary, a line, a path, a drive rail, if you will, which is the proper term for it, for a profile to follow. Okay? So I'm going to use my rectangle as my rail for my profile to follow. Then I also have to have an actual profile. You know, if I was making crown molding, trim, base trim, if I was making picture frame molding, if I was making any type of molded shape and everything, I have to have that profile shape. So my profile shape is going to be, because my rail is 1 inch away from my outer edge and I want my profile to go all the way out to my outer edge, my profile is going to be 1 inch wide. So I'm going to open up and draw a rectangle. Let's close this and open up my rectangle tool. And I'm going to zoom in here, so to the white area. And I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I want this rectangle to be 1 inch wide because that's what my offset is for that drive rail. Now my board is 3/4 of an inch thick, and I don't want my profile going all the way down to the bottom of my board. I'd like to have a little straight edge, you know, of about an 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to put in 0.625 for the height. Now, for you guys and girls that are new and everything here, these boxes that you enter in values in, they are very smart boxes. If you don't know a particular fraction, you can type in that fraction, and you can hit the equal sign on the keyboard. It'll put the decimal in for you. It'll convert it. But also, you can do math. You can add, subtract, multiply, and divide in there. And why would I want to do math? Well, maybe I'm trying to find the circumference of a shape, and I need to, you know, multiply it by pi, or maybe I just want to add something to another to get a, you know, a number, or subtract. Well, what I would use it for is, I just told you that on my material, my 3/4 inch material, which is referred to as T when you're doing math, the thickness of your material, and I wanted to have 1/8 of an inch left over at the bottom. I didn't want to go all the way to the bottom. Well, I can do math, t minus 0.125 and hit equals, and I'll get my 625, right? T stands for thickness. The software knows how thick your material is because you set it up in the job setup. All right, so now with that rectangular shape there, this is what I'm going to build my profile off of. I'm going to go into node editing, and we only need 3 lines of a profile when we create our profile. So this bottom line, this bottom span, I'm going to delete that. Now for here, I'm going to draw out one of my favorite profiles to draw and everything, and then we're going to import some profiles and show you some different looks and stuff. So let's draw this out. I'm going to bring this down a little under halfway there. And I'm still in node editing mode as I'm working. Now this line right here, I'm going to right click on it and turn it to a Bezier curve, meaning that I can curve this. By pulling these anchor points, I can curve this line. Okay. With my circle tool, I'm going to draw a circle right about here, and that's going to be a bead when I trim it up. Also with my circle tool, let's come right about down here. Draw a circle. And with my line tool, I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to click here. I'm going to come down a little bit and click over and space bar to finish. I'm making that little nick there. Now with my trim tool, I'm going to trim away this here. And I'm going to trim away this and this to create that little bead and that step down. But I'm not going to trim this one just yet because I want you to know something. Your router bit is going to be coming down and cutting straight down in here. Okay? Your ball nose bit, you know, whatever it may be, it's going to be coming and cut. Well, you know, as it's running up and stuff, it can't undercut, right? Because it's moving up and down. It's coming, it's traveling down and everything, but when I get here, when I try to get over to here, where's my bit at versus where my profile is going to stop there? It can't undercut. You know, it can't get in there and do that little undercut right there. So I need to change my shape a bit. I need to move this up to right about here. So I'm coming down, you know, I'm running down. Still need to go up a little bit more. All right. Let's stretch this out some. Okay, straight down. I'm not doing any undercutting there. So now I can go ahead and trim my little cove. Okay, very simple profile. Now, I drew this profile, right? But we could also import if we have some, and I actually have some for customers and all that stuff. So if you ever want, you can email me. But picture frames, let's open this up and let's see what we got here. Let's import these. I've got all kinds of profiles to choose from. And every time I draw a picture frame profile, I add it to my DXF list, you know, so that we have it. But I got all kinds of profiles that we could choose from to create our picture frame. You know what I mean? So all kinds of neat ones. Well, let's stick with this one. It's one of my favorites here. Let's stick with this one. Now, when I drew this bead, the top of that bead to the bottom of my profile is I'm no longer at 5/8 of an inch high, right? That bead is taller. So let's go back into our size tool and let's select on our profile, and it's just a little bit over 0.625. I'm going to unlink my X and Y for a minute so I don't make any changes in that X, because I'm going to change this to 0.625. And I'm going to click apply. I'm just going to, you know, bring it down to the right height. Okay? Now, whether I create my profile or I import profiles, you know, whatever the case may be, on my profile molding toolpath, I need a path to follow this. and then the profile to follow that path. Okay, and notice how these lines right here go all the way up to the top, right? That's because my profile is 1 inch. 1 inch. Now, I don't want my profile cutting backwards from the inside out, so I'm going to reverse the direction and make it cut from the outside in. So I want it to go down and out. Now, on my options here for my molding, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch ball nose bit to carve it, but I want sharp corners. I want this to look like a mitered picture frame. I want sharp corners. Okay? And Mike, can you teach us how to create a grayscale depth image for 2D, 3D work? Mike, that would be a Photoshop type tutorial and all that, and I don't teach Photoshop. But if you want to model, topo.io for 2D and 3D, maps of topographical options. You can Google grayscale height maps and find a lot of nice, cool pictures and everything in there. Otherwise, that would be a Photoshop type tutorial, and I don't teach Photoshop. CAD-CAM. All right, so I'm reversing that direction. I got sharp corners in here, and we're going to click Calculate. And I hate leaving things half-assed. So what I was saying was topo.io. That's a website for all kinds of topographical maps. It's a great place. topo.io. Let's try that. Get the spelling right. All right. Now, in topo.io, I can type in any place on the earth, anywhere on the earth, and I can pull up topographical maps of any landscape or terrain. I can save that 3D file, and it creates, and I can save that 3D file to carve. Okay, it's free. Now, also in Google, you can type in height map grayscales, and you can find all kinds of cool grayscale images of different height maps of different things, but you can also find grayscale images of items and stuff, to turn into a model if you have a spire or what have you. So you can look at that. Otherwise, see, creating a grayscale image, like in Photoshop and everything, and stuff, you've got to get your tones and everything right, because normally a grayscale height map has different levels or layers, and usually that is laser scanned in, right? The design is laser scan created, but you can create a Photoshop height map with different tones and everything, but you really gotta work with it. No, and unfortunately I don't teach Photoshop. All right, bud. Okay. All right. So let's look at this profile that we created. Hold your control key down and left mouse, and you can drag this preview and stuff. Okay. I'm recalculating that because I don't have a flat tool. All right, so let's preview that toolpath here. Okay, so this preview, right? So creating like a little picture frame molding. And so if I come in here, so it looks like a mitered frame, right, around my design. Well, let's bring our design in, and let's preview our design inside this mitered frame sign. Okay, let's go ahead and add our texture to this. And this is going to be the horizontal texture. Right? All right, so that would be the, the finished sign and everything. Now I'm going to minimize this. All right, we're back in the Aspire software here in the background, and it's calculated that 3D model that we were working on a moment ago that we just created in that Aspire. So let's preview that. Now this one may cause buffering, so stand by for 1 minute, starting now. I'm stopping it because I'm rastering the wrong direction. You always want to cut with the grain. Let that recalculate. While that's recalculating, let's answer some questions. What is the carve time? Tippy, tippy, tippy. Tippy's all, what is the carve time on that? Well, on this one, this is back in VCarve Pro, right? On my swept profile, which would be done last, right? So let's look at this all together. Let's open up based on my tools, my machine, my speeds and feeds. About 5 hours and 45 minutes. 52 minutes for the pocket cut with that 1/8 inch end mill, carving all that out. 29 minutes and 55 seconds for the V carve around the raised areas and all of the letters and the bass. An hour and 15 minutes for that horizontal texture. And the model here, the profile around the outside perimeter here, 3 hours and 7 minutes. Now, on this molding profile, let me look at that profile really closely. And let me make sure I'm optimizing this. Okay, good. I want to make sure it was going around and around and around, not back and forth. But that one's going to be the big one, the swept profile. If I didn't have that picture frame molding included in there, then we're talking about 2 hours and 37 minutes just to do a nice raised sign with the texture and all. But I'm doing the swept, if I do the swept profile here, that picture frame profile, that's going to bring it up to about 5 hours and 45 minutes from start to finish on that 21 inch by 11 1/4. Now that's based on my settings, my feeds and speeds. Okay. Now, on that, we're almost done recalculating this design. I want to show you what I'm doing with this bass and why I didn't build the model of the bass up, which I could have, and everything. Because I'm actually going to carve in his detail and stuff. V-carve it in. But, so it looks like that. But, long story short is we can use the texturing toolpath, right? We can create all kinds of random textures and what have you based on the perimeters. Now, if I like this texture, the actual perimeters, the depths of cut, the variety of cuts and all that stuff, I can save these settings. I can save them and it will go into my vector texture library, and you can see I've already got some textures in here that I work with all the time. And my go-to 1/8 inch ball nose texture is this one that you're looking at over here. That's that one, so I don't need to resave it. I've already got it in there. But you can do all kinds of textures and things, and if there's one you like and all and you want to use it again, you can simply load that texture parameters into any job. right? No matter, you just have to, you know, change your start depth and change your offsets and all, but it'll load all these parameters for you from whatever you save and everything. And you can make your texture look like all kinds of neat things you can use. It doesn't need to be a ball nose bit. It could be a V bit. It could be an end mill. It could be, and you're going to get some buffering, guys. Hang tight. Hang tight on the buffering. We got buffering. But it could be an end mill. It could be a ball nose. It could be a V bit. You can use all types of bits for that. Dave, what would I sell that for? That sign with the molded frame at that size and everything, it'd be about $225, $175 to $225, somewhere around there. Is what I would sell it for. If I had that hanging up on an art show and some guy named Bob happened to come by and he owned a bait and tackle store and he lived in Ocala, Florida, and he just happened to want that sign because he's never seen another one like it anywhere, he's gonna pay for it. But no, with that frame molding and texture and all, Bob's bait and tackle, you know, I would say something different, of course, but yeah, it'd be between 175 and 225. All right, let's see here. All right, on this profile, let's see if we can preview this. And let me see what my settings are on my preview simulation quality. Let's turn them down so it's fast, so we're not sitting there waiting on this. Let it zip through. Fast means it's going to be kind of pixelated a bit because I'm using the poorest quality pixelation in the preview and all. So William Edlin has a good question. What is going on if your Vectric time estimate to carve actually takes longer on the DWC outside of the tool change time? It's because you don't have the right settings set in Vectric. You don't have the right scale factor. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. Let me get this one done so we can kind of wrap it up, and then I'll talk to you about the times. Now on the bass here, let's go back to our bass now. On our bass, I'm going to select all of the inside of the bass and turn off that outside border. Okay? That outside border is my little island that I just created with the model and all. And on the bass, I'm going to do a very simple V-carve toolpath and 60-degree V-bit. I am going to put a flat depth in there of 1/8 of an inch. No, you know what? Let's go flat depth of 1/4. Let's go flat depth of 1/4. Nope, flat depth of point. I'm going to go 1/2 inch because the tail is going to be the only part of this that's going to carve deep, and I want to go 1/2 inch. So flat depth of 1/2 inch. And I'm going to calculate this toolpath. And let's preview that selected toolpath. Now, notice that the only thing that carved was the tail, right? Nothing else carved. Because anytime you have a 2D vector, which is my bass here, this guy selected, and I'm working with that in a 3D model, we must project the model. All right, project that toolpath onto that model and calculate. It's very important. All right, and we can preview that toolpath. All right, now notice the letter A got carved away because, like a goofball, when I selected this design, I had the A selected as well. So let's turn that A off, or else we're going to have an A-hole in our design. All right, so our model's going to get cut, and then we're going to come back and we're going to change our bit, touch off our V bit, and we're going to V carve that cut in there. Now I could have very simply just modeled that bass just like I modeled the text and the outline of the bass and everything. I could have created a whole model on that, but that's not what this class is about, and we'll have a class on modeling. But that class would be an Aspire class because, you know, you can only model in Aspire. All right. So, you know, we would have a sign that looks something like this. You know, if we brought a model into the equation, you know, that background clip art, instead of creating our own texture, we use that background clip art to create that model type of deal. Now for this, the 1/8 of an inch tapered ball nose would be okay, but I'd probably use like a 1/16 of an inch to get more detail out of my letters and all that stuff. You know what I mean? Now, William asked a question. What happens when I'm estimating a tool time? Okay. What happens when I'm estimating a tool time and it takes longer to carve on our digital wood carver than it does in the Vectric software? Well, the Vectric software is giving you a estimated tool time. All right. So when we hover our mouse over here, summary of tool paths including estimated times. It's an estimate. Now, the one thing it needs to know is the rapid rate of your CNC machine. Okay? All right? And 150 inches a minute is the rapid for the 2440. The scale factor is what's going to change for you, William. If the the scale factor default for the digital wood carver 2440 is, and for the mini carver, is 1.3, but the Vectric can't tell when the machine, what it decelerates to around corners and what it accelerates to, coming out of those corners. The acceleration, the deceleration, and everything, and the ramping and stuff. It can't estimate times on those movements, so it uses a scale factor. So a scale factor of 1 would be if my time says that it's going to take 5 hours and 56 minutes in the software, and I go and run, and it takes exactly 5 hours, 56 minutes, and 15 seconds, then it's a scale factor of 1. If it says it's going to take 5 hours, and it took 10 hours to carve, that's a scale factor of 2. We have a scale factor of 3. Or 1.3. A scale factor of 1.5 would be 7.5 hours, right? If it said 5 hours to carve and it took 7.5 hours, that's a scale factor of 1.5. So you're going to adjust your scale factor accordingly so that your software matches the actual runtime, because it's going to be the runtime on the machine that dictates what this software says, not the other way around. Okay? So we have to make the times match so we can get a good estimated time from our Vectric software. Okay. Yes, William, I do have a job calculator, and it is in the file group section. Stephen and Mary, thank you for joining me. Yes, being new to this, just starting last night and everything, this will be a good tutorial for you to follow probably later, for sure. Okay, so now that I've explained that, let's go in. Now that I've fixed my A, right? I've fixed my A. We should be able to preview that toolpath, and we're good to go. Let's change that to maple, whatever. And of course you're getting a lot of pixelation in this view because it is a pixelated view. I'm using the lowest quality simulation. Okay, I'm using the standard instead of the extremely high that I recommend. Alright, so let's get back into this one here and let's take a look at it. Let's zoom in. Alright. And let's go back and let's see if we have any questions. Yeah, William. So 32 minutes on the DWC, and the Vectric says 23 minutes. So you're gonna change your scale factor to make it to where, you know, when you carve that design, it's 32 minutes. You know, so your scale factor, and once you find the scale factor of your machine, because it will vary. You know, they might vary from one reason or another. Try a scale factor of, if you know that it took 32 minutes on the machine, then change your scale factor until that time, and the estimated time says 32 minutes up here. Then you'll know what your scale factor is. You know, if I come in here and let me turn off all these. Let's say my time said 29 minutes and I knew it took 30 minutes, 35 minutes, or whatever. That's what it actually took. If I change my scale factor, you know, I'm going to change my scale factor until I get that number to match. So if it's 35 minutes, so that's going to be 1.45 is 33, 1.5 is 34, 1.55 is about 35 minutes, 19 seconds, you know, 1.54, whatever my scale factor is, you know, 1.535. Oh, I was close. 1.536. Oh, 0.5355. There you go. 35 minutes. You know, you're going to set your scale factor. Once it's set, then that should be the scale factor for your machine. But it may change. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So if you timed it and you know it took exactly 32 minutes, then go into your software and change it until it says 32 minutes, and then you'll know what your scale factor is for your machine. Nodding. All right. Molding toolpath. We didn't go over a whole lot of that because it's rinse and repeat with the molding toolpath, guys and girls. If you would like these profiles, I've got some picture frame profiles. You could email me. They should be in the Facebook group already. If you cannot find the picture frame profiles in the Facebook group, let me know. It's a DXF file. It should say the file name should be pictureframes.dxf, guys and girls, in the Facebook group. If you don't have it, let me know and I'll update it in there. If you're not part of the group because you're not a digital woodcarver owner, you can always email me, sales@digitalwoodcarver.com. I'd be happy to share that with you. But get creative. Draw your own picture frame profiles and things. You only need the 3 sides, right? And stuff. Draw your own picture frame profiles and create a little DXF file of them so you can pick and choose. You know, you can pick and choose and stuff. And your picture frame profile, you're going to size it accordingly. You're going to size it appropriately for your whatever your offset is. And so what I mean by that is, let's say that I decided, let's find one here. Let's go with this one. Let's pull that over here. All right. So if we look at the size of this profile right here, if we look at the size of it, this profile is 1.19 inches, 1953 inches by a ½ inch. Well, I want it to be 1 inch because that's how wide my offset is unless I change my offset, right, of my rectangle, my path. So I want it to be 1 inch. And then if I go in here and I create that molding toolpath, right, I need to select the path I want to follow first, with the profile that I want to follow that path last. I want sharp corners on this. I'm use that 1/8 inch ball nose end mill. This one's actually got some, there's not a whole lot to it. I could probably use a 1/4 inch ball nose, but let's calculate that toolpath. And let's reset the preview and just look at the picture frame. And let me look at my 2D view and let me see here where my picture frame is drawing here. All right, so it's going to carve from the inside out in this direction, and I don't want that, so I'm going to reverse that direction. Okay, I want to carve from the outside in. We'll see what it looks like either way. So let's calculate that toolpath. And let's look at this, what this one looks like. Well, that looks oddly like my current profile. Oh, no, it's not. I'm about to say it almost looks oddly like my profile, but it's not. It's a big old cove there. All right, cool. So almost like mine, but it's got that big old bead there, right? You know? Let's reverse it. Let's see what it would look like reversed. So let's open that profile back up. And let's reverse the direction of it. It's going to be weird looking, but though. There's no guarantee how this one's going to look, but let's look at it. Might even look better. Let's find out. Now what this means is that that lowest part, that outside part, is now on the inside carving outward to the high part. So it's going to be that kind of reversed frame look. So now it's kind of it's deep and then carving up and outward. All right. So let's get that straight on here. You know, that's what that frame would look like carving that way. I think I'm a fan of the other way. But you have all kinds of different profiles. You can create all kinds of different shapes and things and stuff. Create a little, every time you create a picture frame, save it, export it out as a DXF or add it to your, what I do is I import this DXF file, this picture frame profile, and then I add whatever profile I draw, you know, I kind of add to it. Even this guy over here, right? You know, I would add to it. And then I would export this DXF file, export DXF, and I would just overwrite the original, right? Basically updating it. You know what I mean? And so you can start to build a collection of picture frame profiles. You know, if you don't want to draw your picture frame profiles, then you could trace some images, profile images. So Jim says, could you do the profile flats with an end mill first, then the ball nose? Absolutely, Jim, you sure can. In that swept profile, we have the option to use a larger area clearance tool, okay? And we could check that off, and when we check that off, we have the ability, and let's make this profile active here. We have the ability to select a tool, and let's say I use my 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch end mill, whatever the case may be, and I could machine those flat regions. Okay, and then I could tell my ball nose bit to skip the flat regions because the end mill's already milled them. You know, so I could calculate that toolpath. That's going to give me a swept profile clearing toolpath, and then a swept profile for my ball nose. And let's change my ball nose up a little bit. Now that I'm doing the flat areas with an end mill, let's change my ball nose from 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. Okay, and we can go ahead and reset that preview. Let me change the direction of the cut. I don't like the way that direction is cutting. Reverse the direction. Recalculate that. All right, let's give it a preview. So my clear area, my end mill bit is not only machining the, oops, did I have it checked off to machine the flat regions? bear with me a second. Let me make sure I had it checked off to machine the flat region. Yeah, I did. Okay. And skip flat region. Okay, excellent. So my end mill, my ball nose bit, or my end mill first, is going to do all the flat work. It's going to do a rough cut almost like, but it's also going to mill all the flat regions. So it's going to do a rough cut and kind of step that down that you see here. Let's kind of zoom in on this and tilt this sideways so you can see. Alright, so it's kind of did a rough cut and it machined that flat region. And now when I do my ball nose bit is going to do all of the rounding and everything, and it's going to skip the flat region. Alright, Tippy, I will make sure that that gets uploaded to the Facebook group tonight. Alright, so yes, the answer is yes, you can. Jim, you sure can. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, well, it's 10 o'clock. You know what that means. It's time to say goodnight. Hopefully, I would love to see if you guys experiment with the profile toolpath. Now, keep this in mind, okay? We're doing a profile molding, right? Where's your clamps going to go? If you got mechanical clamps clamping on this board, and you're going to be profile molding, you know, carving and all, you don't want to hit your clamps, right? Think about your clamping. You're going to either have to, you know, like double-side tape or something, or make your board a little bit longer. Put your clamps on those extended links, and then cut those links off, table saw or chop saw or whatever the case may be. Run those off, or do a final profile cut, not with tabs or something, you know, to cut that frame out and all. But you got to think about your clamping, right? Your clamp positions and stuff like that when you're going to mill the outer perimeter of your board. Also think about, you know, your profile and all, and how close that profile is getting to the bottom of your material. And should you have a waste board on your table, always protect your tabletop. Okay? Always protect your tabletop. All right, everybody. Well, listen, it was a long night, 3 hours this time. Sorry about that, but we're trying to just kind of cover some things. Y'all have a wonderful night, and until next time, have some fun with it. Play around, and I hope you guys really do enjoy. Let's preview this one last time and say our good night. If you have any last minute notes or anything, add them now. So, is it more efficient? Well, let's look at the time wise there, Jim. Let's see here. Let this finish out real quick. Stand by 1 second. Let this finish out. Almost there. All right. Let me throw in that texture. Oh, stop. Dadgummit. Stop. Couldn't get it to. All right, let's take a look and see. Let this texture pop in, and let's look and see our 2 swept profile options, and let's see which one is more efficient as far as with or without the flat regions and everything. So if we look at this one, this is the one with the flat regions when it has the clear and everything. If we look at our time, right, let me change my time back to my proper scale factor, 1.3. All right, so that clearing option is with the end mill is going to take 37 minutes, and then the swept profile is going to take another 38 for a total run time of 1 hour and 15 minutes. Okay, let's remove the option of using a flat area clearance tool. Same we're going to have to adjust our bit, right? Because our bit won't be able to do that flat. I need a smaller, it's too small. The 1/4 inch end mill won't do it. So I got to use my 1/8 inch bit. I would really love to be able to kind of compare this to the apples to apples and all, but now I'm using a different bit, so now automatically it's going to be double the time and stuff. But let's calculate this out and let's look at the time. Okay, 2 hours and 37 minutes. So because we're using a smaller bit, right? If I were to, you know, do the whole thing, let's say a 1/4 inch bit could do the whole thing, right? I know, but no flat areas. Just let the 1/4 inch bit do its thing, type of deal. Then my time, that hour and 15 minutes, you know, now it's 38 minutes. You know what I mean? So, is it more efficient? Not necessarily. Using just the ball nose by itself is much faster than the ball nose in the end mill. So is there some place that you can that you talk about the use of your wasteboarding clamps? James, in the Facebook group, the Digital Woodcarver Owners Facebook group. Let me pull that up on the screen here. In the video section of the Digital Woodcarver Owners Facebook group, in the video section, these videos here next to this threaded bolt, especially this one, this is where I'm introducing my cam clamping jig. This is this next video is talking about a little bit of a modification and update to it and stuff. But yes, you know, anytime I have something to share about a jig or that, you can find it there. Also on the channel Spindle TV, right? YouTube.com/Spindle TV, the channel that we're happen to be on right now. In the library, under videos, look at there, we're live right now. But in the videos, if we scroll down, right here, video, effective jigs for CNC setup and production projects. You'll see a cam clamping jig and some other things in there. Not the cam, you won't see the cam clamping jig. That was new after this video, but there's a good one, effective jigs and production setups and stuff. You know, something to talk about. All right, all right, all right. Okay. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. Now, modeling, Wayne, is not necessarily modeling. The molding toolpath is in Desktop, Pro, and Aspire. You can create decorative moldings in Desktop, Pro, and Aspire. It's not just for Aspire. The molding toolpath and everything. But modeling, you know, if you're wanting to build a model, you know, rather than a raised text type of thing where we have kind of a similar type of effect and everything, you can do that as well, but that's Aspire. Okay? All right, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, I'm signing off. Hope to see you next week. We should have a class on Monday, and without fail on Monday, and until next time, see you soon. Have a great night. Thank you for joining me and sticking with me this long. You guys are amazing. See ya.